Have you ever stopped to think about how language can be used, not just to communicate, but to hide things? Well, today we're going to dive into a really powerful and sometimes pretty dangerous idea. How words that sound totally neutral, even a little bureaucratic, can be used as a smokescreen for violence.
So how does that even happen, right? How can language that sounds completely normal, I mean the kind of words you'd find in an office memo, become a weapon? How does it create a smokescreen for truly terrible acts? That's the big question we're going to try and get to the bottom of today.
Okay, so the main tool we're talking about here is the euphemism. It's basically using a mild word instead of a harsh one. And look, we all do it. We say someone passed away instead of died. But what happens when powerful institutions start using this simple little language tool? Well, it can take on a much, much darker role, basically turning something morally unacceptable into just another administrative task.
To really wrap our heads around this, we need to look at a difficult historical example. And I want to be absolutely clear here. Our focus is on the linguistic mechanism itself. We are not equating historical events. We are just examining how language was systematically used to hide a horrific reality. Just look at the difference here. It's jarring. The Nazi bureaucracy used these sterile administrative terms like resettlement to describe deportations that ultimately led to death. Evacuated sounds like a safety measure, doesn't it? But it was actually a deception to force people from their homes. This kind of language creates a clean, bureaucratic layer that completely masks the brutal truth of what was happening.
And this quote just gets right to the heart of it. This isn't just about picking one word over another, it's a moral technique. The whole point is to create emotional and ethical distance. Think about it. An administrator processing a resettlement form doesn't have to face the violent reality of it. The language literally sanitizes the action for everyone involved from the top all the way down.
So, how does this moral technique actually work? I mean, what are the specific steps that let language hide the truth so effectively? Let's break down the core functions.
Our source analysis breaks it down into 3 key steps. First up, relief. The language feels clean, which helps reduce the guilt for the people carrying out the orders. Second, normalization. When you wrap an extreme act in boring bureaucratic jargon, it starts to feel like just another standard procedure, like filling out paperwork. And third, and this is so important, it shifts the entire debate. The conversation is no longer about the morality of the act itself. Hey, should we be doing this? It's about the logistics. How can we do this more efficiently? All right, so let's bring this idea into the present. And again, to be crystal clear, we are not equating historical consequences here. We're simply recognizing that this linguistic mechanism, using neutral-sounding words for harsh actions, is timeless. It can show up in pretty much any political context. So in modern political debates, especially around topics like migration and security, we see words that can work in a similar way. You hear terms like remigration or repatriation, and they sound really administrative. Zero tolerance sounds firm, procedural. The term illegals literally reduces a person to their legal status. The analysis here argues that these words can really obscure the actual human consequences of the policies they're describing. And that brings us to the fundamental question posed by our source material. When we hear this kind of language, does the individual human being, with a family, a story, a whole life, do they stay visible or do they just vanish, replaced by a case file, a number, or some legal category?
So what can we do? How do we learn to see through this linguistic fog? Well, the good news is that once you understand the mechanism, you can actually build a toolkit for spotting it. Here are 3 simple questions you can ask yourself whenever you hear political language. First, are actual people being turned into abstract categories? Second, look out for the passive voice. When someone says, "it will be implemented," you should ask, wait, who is doing the implementing? The person acting is hidden. And third, are abstract nouns like measures or consequences being used to avoid describing a concrete and often violent action? And here are the counter strategies. First, you can actively de-euphemize. So translate that abstract term back into what it really means in the real world. Zero tolerance, for example, can mean families being separated. Second, center the people who are affected. Always ask, what does this policy actually do to a family or to a community? And finally, we can demand better standards for our language. Advocate for clear words that don't hide the human cost.
So we're left with this final, really powerful thought to chew on. How would our political debates change if we stripped away all the administrative vocabulary? What if we were forced to use concrete verbs that describe exactly what is being done to people?
It's a challenge, really, for all of us to start listening a little more critically.